Welcome! You're listening to Making Relationships Work. We're a company focused on women and their marriage. We lead and teach women just like you how to grow into and access, whenever you need to, your wise woman's self. The part of you who is deeply connected to your purpose, your innate wisdom, and your husband and family. We teach women in marriages how to rebuild trust and connection, to work through conflicts no matter how deep, no matter how painful, and to lead your marriage to a place where the two of you experience marriage mastery. This podcast is about learning the systems and techniques that truly work to reconnect you back into your marriage so that you can experience the freedom that comes with a masterful marriage. Since this podcast is totally free, if you're getting tons of value and you want to support us and make sure that you get more of this good stuff, subscribe below and rate and review our podcast today. Now, on to the show. Oh, hello everyone. Hello, it's me, it's Meg. Welcome to Making Relationships Work and Women Making Marriages Work. We are live here tonight. We are talking about sex, we are talking about intimacy, we are talking about when that is not working, because this is one of the number one indicators that a marriage is not working. And when I read through that list of topics that we've got in the Women Making Marriages Work Facebook group, the free one that anyone can join, just search for us on Facebook, women only though. There's a topic thread about all the things you want me to talk about. And of the top three things, sex and intimacy, so emotional intimacy as well as physical intimacy, that's one of the top ones. And people are saying, why isn't this working for us? I don't really mind that the sex part's not working for us, but I miss my friend. Where is my friend? And here's the thing, we need to talk about this because sex and intimacy are like the symptoms of how a marriage is going. And so if you're not physically intimate, if you're not emotionally intimate regularly, then there is something going on, and probably something that left unchecked will not take you somewhere that you want to go, will not be something that you want to have happen in your marriage. So let's talk about it tonight. Let's get really clear on what it is. Let's get really clear on what happens if you don't treat it. And let's give you some ways to do things differently. So beautiful Leilani is here. I'm just going to make sure Leilani can hear me. So just give me a thumbs up if this live is working beautifully, and then we're going to dive right in. So when you think about how the two of you started having sex and intimacy, I want you to think about that level of passion, that level of desire and connection and exploration and freedom and comfort and warmth that came from the two of you being together, because that is the beginning. That part of the marriage or that part of any relationship lasts between 6 months and 2 years. And it's this wonderful biochemical cocktail of hormones, and it's called the limerence phase. And so if you think about that, and you think about that from a getting the two of you really deeply connected, which is what sex and intimacy is designed to do. It's designed for pleasure and comfort and safety and procreation. But connection essentially makes the two of you more than friends. It makes the two of you more than neighbors. It makes the two of you bond together. And so that bonding that happens in the early years is really aided quite well by big spikes of wonderful neurochemicals. Yeah, so we don't need to spend a lot of time in there, but essentially there's bonding chemicals, there is feel-good chemicals like oxytocin and serotonin that are released, and that combination allows the two of you to begin the process of falling in love. Now, any relationship is going to end at some point, that limerence phase, not the relationship, the limerence phase. That is normal. And then we're moving into kind of like the rest of your life. And so some people say, well, you can't have sex and intimacy like it was in the beginning, because That's not realistic, don't you know? I've got all of these kids. I've got all of these work obligations. I've got to look after my parents. I've got to do activities after school. I've got to be a volunteer and a person in the community. And I'm trying to also have my own life. And sex and intimacy just feels like it's something else that I have to do. And that, my loves, is probably what we need to talk about the most tonight. Because sex and intimacy, when you view it in that kind of lens, like I've got to try and slot it in, is not something that is of high value to you. Do you hear that? When it becomes like a list of things, oh, I must go and have an orgasm, or oh gosh, I must go and be intimate with my husband because that's the only way that we're going to have a good weekend. That's not an openness of connection, and that's not an experience where you're looking forward to it, where you're feeling like, I want to be with my friend, I want to feel his skin on my skin, I want to hold his hand, I want to tell him how I appreciate it and love him, and I want to feel good in my body. And so that description I just gave you would work for sex, but it also works for emotional intimacy. And the two things are different, because you can be holding hands and cuddling, and it actually isn't sex, but it is still very restorative and still very lovely. So you'll see throughout this conversation, I'm going to start to use these words interchangeably. Sex and emotional intimacy, or physical intimacy, kind of go in and out. And so tonight's conversation is not about sex specifically. We're going to have to do that on another night. We just don't have enough time to cover everything. But I want to alert you to the thinking that goes behind deprioritizing a sense of love and intimacy. And if that's you, I want you to do some deep reflective work around, why don't I want to feel good? Why don't I want to belong to myself and open myself up to feel a connection with this man that I love? Why don't I want to do that? So that's one thing I want you to do if it's you that's resisting physical intimacy and emotional intimacy. Now, if it's your husband, it's a second conversation, because if he is resisting physical intimacy and emotional intimacy, then, and you are not, you're trying to lead it and you're feeling like you're not getting what you're looking for, then there's a conversation with him that needs to happen. And if you're like most couples, where sometimes it's you and sometimes it's him, and you're just having trouble landing at the right place at the right time, where there's some space, then know that you're not alone. And we're going to talk about that as well. So there's kind of three variations of why sex and intimacy are dropping. And it's really important to name all of them and to let you know that whilst it is normal in busy stages of life to have a reduction in intimacy, it doesn't do your relationship good to let that go on for too long. And let me talk to you about why. So when a relationship is in a masterful space, that means that the two of you are loving each other well, you're feeling connected with each other, you're feeling like you are a team, so you're a we, not two me's. When that happens, what I love most about that space, which is what we call the masterful space, is that if your husband comes home and is upset, or comes home and doesn't want to have sex with you, you don't say, oh my gosh, it's something about me. Oh my gosh, he doesn't love me. He doesn't find me attractive. My bum looks too big. You don't do any of that because you're so well connected as a team. Instead, you say, my husband, there's something wrong with my friend. Something has happened today. And you get a very different way in which you show up. Now, can you make sense of that? Yeah? So when you're feeling like you're a team and you're in that masterful space where the energy is flowing easily between you, you're loving each other well, you're able to resolve conflicts well, and your friend comes home grouchy, you are not going to say, he doesn't love me anymore. You are going to say, is my friend okay? And of course, that whole idea translates right across your relationship, particularly in intimacy and sex. And so that's the first idea. So if your intimacy and sex is not at the place that you want it, probably the rest of your relationship is not at the place where you want it. Because the way in which you engage emotionally in terms of intimacy and physically in terms of intimacy, is a very good indicator. It's a complete cause and effect most of the time of how the relationship is going from a connection point of view. So if sex isn't working in your marriage, your emotional connection is probably not working either. And if either one of those are not working, probably the two of you are not not able to resolve conflict very well, and are also not really engaging in we type behaviors where it's us against the world. More likely two me's trying to get the life done and kind of getting a bit cross at the other one from time to time for not doing it right. Does that make sense? And so left unchecked, okay, so I get that when you've got a baby, I get that when you've got young kids, it's really hard to find the space and time because you're literally so busy and exhausted. It's really hard to find the time to be emotionally intimate or physically intimate the way it is before kids or when you've got older kids. So I get that. And so there's a time and a space in a marriage where it will ebb and flow, and there's nothing wrong with that. We're talking about what happens though if you leave it too long, or you grow apart too far. When you start to trade the bond of physical and emotional intimacy to get a job list done, you're actually trading the happiness of your marriage. And that is really important. Do you hear me on this? When you make the decision to not give and receive pleasure, which is what happens in emotional intimacy and physical intimacy, you are trading a connection, you are trading an experience that you co-create together as a we team, like a you and me against the world. And that is so important for you to know. Do you see? If you're not engaging in the very thing that makes you different in a relationship than two friends or two housemates or two neighbors, then you're going to start to notice that the rest of the stuff in your marriage isn't working as well either, because the distance starts to get wider. And then all of a sudden, you're like 6 years in of this up and down, eking away, kind of making decisions not to prioritize intimacy or sex, or not being able to resolve problems. And all of a sudden, over a period of 6 years, which remember is the average time it takes for a couple to get really, like seriously in crisis, all of a sudden, you're like, where did my friend go? And let me tell you, that didn't happen yesterday or the day before or 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago. It happened in those incremental decisions over a long period of time. And that's probably the bulk of the work that I do. Now, of course, there are exceptions to that. And so I want to make sure you understand that I know that. And those exceptions we talk about in different videos. But for today, with the bulk of the population, it's small decisions every day that doesn't prioritize intimacy or the we. That is the reason why you're in trouble. And this is what I want you to know. And so now I'm going to add in another conversation component. I'm going to add in what happens when you really start to deviate, is that you'll start to find behaviors in couples that may not be a betrayal in terms of a physical affair, but might be an emotional betrayal, or where you're looking for that need to be met by somebody else. So when a husband or a wife hasn't met the need of themselves through, and in this particular component we're talking about, and physical intimacy and emotional intimacy, which humans need, okay? They need that. That makes everything feel better from a biochemical point of view, but also from a biological and an evolutionary perspective, that physical intimacy that comes with being married to somebody, which is the social construct we use. That means that I am safe, I am loved, I am safe, I am loved. And if you think about Maslow's hierarchy of need, that's the bottom. Now, what we know for sure in research is that when someone has a need and it doesn't get met time after time after time, and that might be physically or emotionally, is that eventually the two people will start to turn away and they will go and get that need met a different way. And herein lies the beginning of the slippery slope of really complex problems. Okay, because what will happen is that people will start to notice other people. They'll start to, I'm going to try and use very young language, like they'll find that people that they went to school with will slide into their DMs, which is probably not something that we talk about in our age bracket, but it's essentially starting to chat with other people who emotionally connect with us or notice us, or who physically do that. And that is the beginning of a slippery slope. So I'm not saying that a lack of physical and emotional intimacy always leads to an affair. That's not what this conversation is. But I am saying you take that unmet need and it has to go somewhere else. Now, for many people, where it goes is porn. Porn is something that the average male views by age 10 and the average female views by age 16. And most people don't see a real problem with porn, but let me talk to you about how it is a problem, because this is a really important conversation. So many people view porn alone, but some couples use porn as a way to spice things up in the bedroom. And I kind of get that. If you've been married for 10 or 15 or 20 years and the passion isn't quite as passionate as it once was, porn can be something that allows you to kind of escape a little bit. But what we know is that the effects of porn is quite high on humans. And what can happen is when you start to use porn a lot, is that you will find that it starts to change the brain. So our conversation today is not about porn, but it is about noticing that if you have a need for emotional intimacy or physical intimacy, and within your conversations with each other, you're not talking about what your needs are, and you're not working to meet those needs as a human will be met elsewhere. And when they're met elsewhere, that's where we start to find the separation of a couple from an emotional perspective. And sometimes from a physical perspective when the betrayals happen. And so what I want you to know is that I don't at all identify porn as good or bad, sinful or not. I don't have any of those kind of labels on it. But what I am trying to communicate with you is that when we're starting to meet needs via different ways, we're starting a slippery slope towards an emotional separation. And so if we are using porn, or if you're using chatting with somebody else, or you're emotionally intimate with somebody else, or physically intimate with somebody else, those are all breaks in the connection and the trust that women and men or couples need to have in order to feel good and connected and calm and kind and wonderful, and to build that marriage together. And so if your marriage is not working very well, what I want for you to know is that you've got to bring it right back. You've got to bring it right back away from the symptoms of porn or the symptoms of emotional cheating or betrayal or physical cheating or betrayal or just emotional disconnection. It doesn't have to be anything as big as those other three. It can be just that separation where you're roommates, instead of best friends and lovers. I want you to notice where you are, and I want you to trace back where it started from. Because even if you're not at those big points that I just outlined now, if you don't change where you are now, you will end up there. It just will take an incremental amount of time to get there. They kind of build on each other every day. And so what I want you to know is that you can do something about this right now. You can have a different life right now. And what it takes is to be able to reconnect each other to each other. And so that doesn't mean wild, sex-fueled weekends of passion, although go for it if that's your thing. I think what we're talking about is going right back in time and realizing that moment of where you started to not prioritize being emotionally and physically close in order to get a to-do list done. And probably that started when your job got very busy, or you added another child to your family, or you added a child to your family. And all of a sudden that space, that sacred space for you two to be a couple, got some time taken out of it, and perhaps it never got the time added back into it. And then over time, it sort of separates out where you kind of forget how to reconnect, or maybe you feel a bit bashful, or you become the kind of couple that's having sex in the same way every time because it works, and you've forgotten that it's an emotional connection opportunity where you can be together and be friends and enjoy and laugh and have fun together. And in that co-creation lies an increase in trust, an increase in connection, an increase in commitment to the two of you. And then when you've got that energy moving in your relationship, all of a sudden it's not two me's, it's a we. And this is what we're talking about. This is what we want to have different for you. Because over time, when you don't engage emotionally or physically, you're going to run down that sense of commitment, that sense of trust, that sense of positivity, and that sense of love that flows through the marriage that allows you to support each other well, to love each other well, to connect with each other well, and to see the good more than the bad. So if you're evaluating your husband and he's coming up with all these things that aren't working for you, probably your emotional and physical connection is also lacking, because the two go hand in hand together. And so now you're probably wondering, well, all right, you've kind of mapped this right out. I get it. This is us. What do we do? So here's what you're going to do. The very first thing you're going to do is to understand that sex and intimacy are a barometer. And if your barometer is telling you that you're not as close as you would like to be, and that you're feeling that gap between the two of you, I want you to use that understanding as intelligence. Okay, there's a gap. Where did it start? What was happening? Why did it start? Then you can have a conversation with your husband about it. If that conversation doesn't land, or it brings up all of this stuff that you don't know what to do with, you're going to watch my masterclass. In a minute, Leilani is going to put the link into the masterclass, and that's going to give you ways to reconnect. And when you've got that reconnection on an emotional level, you can start being emotionally intimate and physically intimate. So that's what you're going to do. If that doesn't work, you are going to book a call with us, and we are going to get to the bottom of what's actually really going on, because we are complex creatures. And if it's gone for a long period of time, probably what you need is a more detailed assessment and a plan. And that's what we can do for you. So Leilani will put in the link to book. We want to help you, and I want you to really understand that sex and intimacy are the barometer for how well your functional marriage is going. How much energy is in the marriage is reflected in how much sex and intimacy you have. How much connection you have, how much trust, how much commitment, how much us against the world will be reflected in your intimacy. And if that's not working because you've got a list of things to do and you're prioritizing that over feeling good and connected and kind and loving with each other, we can work with that. That is not the be all and the end all. The thing is that everything is work through a ball, but we've got to get really clear on what's not working so we can make the decision to do it differently and better. So I'm going to have a quick look at any questions that we have. Heather has said that you feel like that's why he isn't attracted to you or your physical connection. He's comparative and it's harmful to the both of you. My love, Heather, I hope you're still listening to this. You're right. What starts that cascade of steps? Remember I talked about how it's an incremental process. So there's a series of 24 separations that happen over a period of time. And one of the core reasons why we separate is that we have a negative evaluation and then we put a negative comparison in. And those two things together drive the wedge. So Heather, you're right. And that is also still undoable. But it's not that he's not attracted to you. It's that he is very emotionally disconnected from you based on your comment. And when he's disconnected from you, and he's negatively comparing you to other things and only noticing the bad, we get stuck in that pattern and that cycle, and we forget and we feel resistant to and defensive of being connected, because probably it hurts. And why does it hurt? Because there's a whole lot of stuff that has happened over a long period of time to break that connection, to break that trust, to break that commitment level. of only seeing my friend in a positive light, which most of you, 99% of you, would have had at the beginning of your courtship or your marriage or your relationship. And so that is possible to create again, but not in the limerence phase that it was. But we can move a marriage in that level of pain and disconnect into something that's masterful and warm and comforting and uplifting, where you can work through anything. You can be connected, you can be kind, you can talk through the hard stuff, and you can resolve it. That is all doable. So the first steps to do that are to have those 2 conversations I talked about, to use the data to make an inference, to figure out where's it going wrong, have a conversation with him, watch my masterclass to get the tips about how to do that. If that's not working for you, book a call. We'll get you really clear, and then we can create something that is different for you. You can have a different marriage at any time whenever you're ready. We just have to decide that what's working right now is not good enough. It's actually not really working, and it's not creating the life that you deserve or that you want or that your husband wants or that your children who are watching you and learning from you about what a marriage is, what they want. And this is the opportunity. So my loves, it's nearly time for me to get going. I love being here with you. I'll see you all here on Monday next week, and we're going to do another topic, but I haven't picked out what it is. I tend to roll through the list that you leave me, and Leilani, maybe you can bump that up so everyone can see it. And I just pick out the one that I feel like I'm ready to talk about. That's how I decide. It's a bit random roulette-y. Today, I really wanted to talk through sex and intimacy, and when it's just not working, what are you going to do? Why is it like this? And why are you not prioritizing feeling good? Because everyone deserves to feel good. Oh my gosh, and sex and intimacy are the most beautiful ways to do that. So it's time for me to go. I love all of you. I'll see you next week. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye, darlings.